Now at this point we're going to be discussing how to create a custom class inside Dreamweaver. Now at the moment I happen to have a number of paragraphs that are looking a certain way, not because I define them with a element selector as I have done with the body, but more importantly because the paragraphs are inheriting information from the body itself. So in other words, if I click on the body, you might remember that the paragraphs are getting its color from the body definition, and the font size is being defined here as 100%, which is a relative means of stating whatever the user agent's default, whatever the browser's default for paragraphs happen to be. Now before we actually go about creating a custom class, what I'm going to ask you to do is simply add a little bit of styling to these paragraphs. And as we saw in the previous video, this is going to still be a tag or element selector to make all paragraphs universally site-wide look a certain way. So let's do that by clicking on the new CSS rule button. When we open up the new CSS rule window, we're going to still say tag, and we're going to specify the paragraph tag. And it's not going to be in this document only, it's going to be in styles.css, and we're going to click OK. Then, I don't really want you to be changing anything with regards to the font family or the font size. What I do want to change is the line height, and the line height determines the amount of space between each of the lines within a paragraph. Now I could do this with an absolute value of pixels, but since we're working with the relative values of ems, I just want to show you. If I came in here and said 1em for line height, that would sort of tighten this up because it's the default values, and if we press apply, take a good look at it before I do that, now you'll see it's tightened up. So it's not exactly what I want. I think I want this to be breathing a little bit more. Let's space it out with maybe 1.2, and then if I hit the apply key, that's pretty good, but I think I want to go even more than this, so I'll probably say 1.4. Let's try that. Nice. So now you can see that there's a little bit more space between the elements, and they look a little bit more visually appealing. I can read them a lot easier, and it doesn't seem so tight. Again, if you wanted to, you could even change this in this area, and you could say maybe 1.5. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so I think I can live with that. That's pretty good. Now, you'll notice that I've got a lot of paragraphs working in here, but there is an area here where I have To Helen, and there's a small poem that Poe has written, to Helen, of course, and there are 3 paragraphs here. I kind of want these paragraphs to look a little bit different. So, in order to do that, we are going to create something that is called a custom class. So let's try and do that by clicking on the plus sign, yet again, to create a new CSS rule. And in the new CSS rule, the contextual selector that I want to choose is a class, not a tag, but this time a class. Now, the selector name can be anything that we want to give it. And the only stipulation you must remember is that whenever you're creating a custom class, you need to put a period before the name. So since this is poetry, I'm going to call it poetry. .poetry. It's in the external style sheet called style.css. We'll click OK. Now, even though I'm going to make some changes right now, we're not really going to see any of these changes take place just yet. Well, perhaps I want to change the font family. Maybe we want to choose something that is not a sans or sans serif, maybe not a serif. Maybe we want to go with a monospace or something that looks like a typewriter font, slab serif. So I'm going to choose Courier. And here where it says font size, maybe I want it to be smaller than the 1em value, maybe smaller than 16 pixels. So perhaps I'll come in here and say 0.8, not pixels, but ems. And maybe the line height will be smaller as well. Maybe I'll just say 1em for the line height. You can change all of this a little bit later. Aside from this, there's not really much I want to do at the moment. Now, pressing apply wouldn't really work because we have to assign the value here first. So I'm just going to click OK, and here where it says poetry, that's the name of our class, but the class has not been applied to anything just yet. Let me take a look at this first. If I select this and then go into my code view, you can see that it's just a normal paragraph. Open P, closing P, with some BR tags separating those lines. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to select this paragraph, and one of the ways of assigning a custom class to this HTML element is to go to the properties window, and here where it says HTML, you can see it's already formatted as a paragraph, but here where it says class none, we're going to choose from our list. If I had more classes, I would have a longer list, but right now I only have the poetry class. So if I click on this, aha, now you can see how this paragraph is made to look different from all the other ones. Now let's take a look. If we go into our code view, you'll notice that this paragraph is different from the other ones, specifically because it now has an attribute that says class equals poetry. Now if I were to write this by hand, I could just put a space after that P, I could double click class, and look, even here I have a list, poetry. And if you were to go to your design view, you would see that, ah yes, this one too now has been assigned a custom class. I'll select the last line of poetry and do it for this one as well. Now these three paragraphs look very different from all the other ones because of the values that we've assigned. So if you want to go in here and make some changes, you certainly can. I'll perhaps want this to be a little bit bigger, so I'll say 0.9 ems. And that's made it a little bit more legible. And if you wanted to, you could change the line height as well, or any number of different things. You could also do things like come into the poetry custom class by double clicking it, and you could assign perhaps a background color. Let's try this. If I were to come in here and say, let's see what it looks like with a white background. Aha! Now you'll notice that all of those paragraphs have white backgrounds behind them. And that's just fine, nothing really wrong with that. If I wanted to, I could even give it a border or something along those lines, but that's not exactly what I want to do. So I'm actually going to remove the background and just keep it as it was a second ago. So that's the first thing about custom classes that I wanted to show you. And like I said, if you want to apply a custom class to anything, for example, even this paragraph here, I could just come in, say poetry, and all of a sudden this paragraph looks very different from the other ones that I've just created. So you can remove that class just by coming here and saying none, and now it's back to its normal paragraph. Come back in the next video and I'll show you a little bit more about working with custom classes.